I recently had to deal with the most entitled Karen I've ever met. She actually fined me for building a permitted cinder block wall just because it blocked her view. Her excuse? According to her, the wall violated HOA rules. Funny enough, the only real violation in the end turned out to be the sledgehammer she used to try to tear it down. But let me start from the beginning. My name's Michael Cole. I build homes, everything from the ground up. From a bare lot of mud to the day a family walks in with their keys, that's my craft. I like things straight, level, square, and precise. That's how I live, too. Follow the plans, follow the code, and you'll have something strong that lasts. That was exactly what I wanted when I bought my own house in Sunnyside. A little peace, a low-maintenance yard, and neighbors who minded their own business. The sales agent described it as a community with active oversight. I should have known that was code for people will measure your grass with a ruler. But at first, it was exactly what I wanted. I'd come home after a noisy day on job sites, sit on my patio, and all I'd hear was wind moving through the hedges. Those hedges were why I bought the place. They stretched the full length of my property line, a thick 6-foot wall of green. They were my fence, my privacy. Then came Karen Dunn's re-election as HOA president. I didn't vote. I don't like to get involved in neighborhood politics. That was my second mistake. The first was buying in an HOA neighborhood in the first place. Karen was the type who thrived on control, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, with a smile that never felt real. Our only prior interaction had been when she left a note on my door about my trash can being visible from the street, 2 hours after pickup. I crumpled the note and brought the can in earlier next time. End of story, or so I thought. I couldn't have been more wrong. That Saturday, I was in my garage sharpening saw blades. My best friend, Buddy Bryce, was supposed to swing by for the game. The smell of hot metal hung in the air when I suddenly heard the buzz of a hedge trimmer. Odd, since my yard guy had just been there 2 days ago. I stepped outside and froze. Karen Dunn was in my yard. White tennis shorts, pink polo, and a face locked in concentration as she hacked away at my hedges. Not trimming, destroying. She was chopping them down to half their height, leaving splintered stumps where my privacy wall had been. Beside her was a man I didn't recognize, stuffing the debris into huge paper bags. For a second, I just stood there, stunned. I'm not the type to blow up. On job sites, yelling doesn't fix mistakes. You just solve the problem. So I pulled out my phone, hit record, and calmly walked toward her. "Excuse me," I said evenly. She didn't even stop trimming. "Morning, Michael," she replied like this was perfectly normal. "Just clearing the sight lines. We've had complaints." Complaints? From who? And what gives you the right to be on my property cutting my plants? Finally, she shut the trimmer off. The sudden silence felt deafening. She dabbed sweat from her forehead and said, "The community has a right to clear and safe sight lines. Your overgrown bushes were a hazard. We can't have the neighborhood looking blue-collar." She spit out bushes like it was a dirty word. "They're hedges," I corrected. "On my property. The HOA rules allow 6 feet. Mine are 6 feet. They were here when I bought the place. Perfectly within code." Her smile thinned. "The board has discretion." "Discretion isn't a tape measure," I shot back. "The board decided they were a problem." Her helper, who I'd later learn was her brother-in-law, kept his head down, quietly bagging branches. I lifted my phone slightly. "You know I'm recording this, right?" For just a moment, she looked unsettled. Then her steel demeanor snapped back. "Go ahead. All you'll capture is an HOA president taking proactive steps for community safety." She fired the trimmer back up, like daring me to stop her. So I filmed her destroying another 10 feet of hedge. I filmed her brother-in-law hauling bags across the street to a truck. I even zoomed in on the property marker, clearly proving the hedge was entirely on my land. She gutted the entire 100-foot row, then left without another word. I just stood there, staring at the wreckage. The game would start soon, but all I felt was a hot coal of anger in my gut. I wanted to yell, throw something, but I didn't. I just saved the recording. Winning isn't about swinging first. It's about having the smarter plan. And as I looked at that wide open space, a plan began forming. The first person I called was Buddy. He's a plumber, meaning he knows two truths: how things connect and that all messes flow downhill. I sent him the video. His reply: I have a shovel. Say the word. Tempting, but that wasn't my way. I don't make bigger problems. I build solid solutions. Still, I asked him to come over. I needed a second set of eyes. While waiting, I printed out Sunnyside's entire HOA rulebook, 112 pages of legal fluff. I grabbed a highlighter and a red pen. Reading that stuff is no different than reading blueprints. You look for the load-bearing rules, the structure, and the weak points. Buddy arrived with a six-pack and a scowl. Standing where my Hedges used to be, he muttered, "She really trashed this? You want me to talk to her husband?" I shook my head. No, we're going to beat her with her own rule book. At the kitchen table, we combed through the bylaws. And there it was. Page 47, Section 8, Subsection C. Fences and walls. 6-foot maximum height, masonry allowed, 3 feet from sidewalks. My property line was 10 feet from the sidewalk. Perfect. Then came the jackpot. Page 98, Section 14, Subsection A. Any exterior modification required submitting plans to the Architectural Review Committee, the ACC. The committee had 14 calendar days to approve or deny in writing. If they didn't, automatic approval. That was the crack in her armor, arrogance and laziness. The next day, I introduced myself to my other neighbor, Tom, a quiet, retired accountant. He'd once been HOA treasurer under Karen for a single year. He'd quit, sick of her antics. Over coffee in his meticulous house, he confirmed everything. Karen controlled both the board and the ACC, approvals for her friends, denials for everyone else, fines for people she disliked, money funneling into her brother-in-law's landscaping company. Tom leaned in. She relies on intimidation. People submit applications, she ignores them, and they give up. Nobody's ever called her bluff. Well, I build houses for a living. Calling bluffs is my daily job. I spent 2 days drafting a professional blueprint for a 6-foot, 100-foot long cinder block wall. Not a sketch, a complete plan. Block type, mortar, footings, rebar schedule, even code references. The kind of plan a city planning office would rubber stamp without hesitation. On Monday, I made 3 copies. I walked to the HOA clubhouse drop slot. Before sliding it in, I filmed myself. Date, time, close-up of the application, and the envelope going in. Michael Cole, submitting ACC application for a masonry wall at 123 Sunny Lane, October 5th, 9:02 a.m. Documentation is everything. 14 days. That's how long they had. And I knew she wouldn't respond. The next 2 weeks were quiet. No letter, no call, no email. Just as Tom had said, she was ignoring me, assuming I'd fold. Every evening, I sat on my patio, staring at the butchered hedge stumps. No privacy left. On day 15 before dawn, I had my coffee and walked out to my truck. By their own rules, my wall was now approved by default. Time to build. I'd already pulled the county permit and called 811 to mark utilities. That morning, the materials arrived. Pallets of gray cinder blocks, stacks of mortar, bundles of rebar. The delivery driver whistled. "Building a fortress?" "Something like that," I told him. The first step was the hardest, digging the trench for the footing. It had to be deep, straight, and perfectly level. I spent the entire first day carving that line into the ground with nothing but a shovel and a level, knowing exactly what I was about to build. I carved a clean line into the earth where my Hedges used to be. It was back-breaking work, sweaty, dirty, and strangely satisfying. Every shovelful of dirt felt like I was burying Karen's petty tyranny one scoop at a time. My neighbors on the fence line, a younger couple named Mark and Sarah, peeked out from their window. I waved. They hesitantly waved back. I couldn't blame them. They clearly didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. When the trench was ready and the rebar laid, it was time for concrete. No way was I mixing bags myself. I called in a small cement truck. The roar of the engine was like music to me. And right on cue, Karen came striding out onto her manicured lawn, arms folded, staring daggers as the gray slurry filled my foundation trench. Her face twisted like she'd just bitten into something sour. I ignored her and focused on smoothing the concrete, making sure the footing was flawless. If the base isn't right, nothing above it will ever stand straight. Same rule. Applies to life. Once it cured, the wall rose fast. The process was almost meditative. Butter a block with mortar, set it, tap it square with the trowel handle, check the level, scrape away the excess. Again and again. Every fourth cell I dropped rebar and filled with grout, tying the whole run together like a steel spine. With bond beam caps locking everything, even a sledgehammer would just bounce off. There's no room for rage when you're laying block. You have to be patient and precise. My frustration with Karen, every ounce of it got channeled into making each joint perfect. I even set up a time-lapse camera on a tripod to capture the whole build. Later, watching it back, the footage was incredible. This wall seemed to grow out of the ground inch by inch, from a line of concrete to knee height, waist height, and finally a proud 6-foot wall. After long days on job sites, I came home and built until dark. On weekends, Buddy showed up to help, hauling blocks, mixing mortar in a wheelbarrow. "You know," he said one afternoon, sweat streaking his face, "this is the most fun I've had in years. Therapy, but with concrete." He was right. We barely talked, just worked. The scrape of trowels, the thud of blocks, steady and satisfying. Neighbors strolled past, some giving me thumbs up, others glaring, probably Karen's loyalists. Didn't matter. I was by the book. My wall had more legal standing than her presidency. By the 5th day, it stood complete. 100 feet long, 6 feet tall, dead straight. A fortress of gray stone, solid and private. I swept the patio, coiled my hoses, stacked the leftover blocks neatly. Standing back, I admired it. A damn fine wall, if I said so myself. That's when a car screeched, to a stop out front. Karen. She stormed across the street, face red as fire, and stomped up to my wall. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. I looked at her, then at the wall, and gave a calm, polite smile. "It's a wall," I said evenly. "Approved." That day, a spare sledgehammer leaned against the stacked blocks. Karen snatched it up, jabbing it toward the wall like a weapon. I didn't flinch. Buddy, stacking extras nearby, muttered, "Smile, Queen, this is your good side." With a loud clang, she slammed the hammer back onto the concrete. "Cinder blocks? This isn't a prison." "Good news," I said mildly. "Nobody's sentenced to live here." From across the fence, someone whispered, "Oh," and a few phones popped up, recording. Karen stepped closer onto my patio, muttering about documenting violations. I pointed toward the property stake. "One more step and you're trespassing again." She froze, then stepped back, eyes narrowed, to slits. She didn't have a leg to stand on. She'd ignored my application, and now her neglect stood before her in solid stone. She had no one to blame but herself. Judging by the fury on her face, though, I knew this wasn't over. She'd just lost round 1, and she was already scheming the next. For a few days, she kept her distance, just dirty looks when she drove, by pacing her lawn on her phone. I imagined her scouring the rule book, clawing for a loophole, but I'd built too carefully. She had nothing. Any reasonable person would have conceded. But Karen Dunn wasn't reasonable if she couldn't tear. My wall down, she'd find another way to come at me. And her next move? Pure spite. wrapped in a brilliant kind of pettiness. About a week later, a new crew arrived. Not professionals, just her brother-in-law's ragtag workers. They started putting up something on the narrow strip of common land right next to my wall. That strip wasn't private. It was a drainage easement under county control. No one was allowed to build there without a permit. At first, I figured she was throwing up her own fence. But no, it was a monstrosity. They cobbled together a hideous lattice frame from cheap, untreated lumber. It wasn't solid. It was bizarre, like a giant tic-tac-toe board gone wrong. By the end of the first day, it stood 8 feet tall, throwing an ugly shadow across my back patio. By day 2, it was 10 feet high. It killed the grass underneath, blocked my morning sun, and loomed absurdly over everything. And it was blatantly illegal. Her own favorite rule, the 6-foot maximum, broken in the most public way possible. She was announcing to everyone that rules applied to them, not to her. Mark and Sarah now had a front-row view of this monstrosity from their kitchen. I caught Mark outside one evening, just shaking his head at it. This was Karen's game. She wanted me to rage, to file a complaint, to enter her maze of fake hearings and paperwork that she controlled. But I wasn't about to play her game. I didn't send a single email to the HOA, not one phone call to the board. Instead, I made a different call. I dialed county code enforcement. I've worked with inspectors for years, and I've got half their numbers saved. I reached Dave, one of the toughest but fairest guys I know. "Hey, Dave, it's Michael Cole," I said. "Got something strange going on in Sunnyside." I laid it all out. My approved 6-foot wall, and now this 10-foot eyesore sprouting on. Common property with no permit. Sent him photos. He was silent for a beat, then asked, 10 feet? On county easement? No permit? That's what I'm looking at, I said. All right, he said finally. I'll swing by this afternoon. Should be interesting. I didn't breathe a word to anyone. Sure enough, around 2 o'clock, Dave's county truck pulled up. Clipboard in hand, camera slung over his shoulder. He spent 20 minutes circling the structure, snapping pictures, measuring. Karen must have had a lookout, because minutes later she came storming down the street, hands on her hips. "Can I help you?" she demanded. Dave glanced at her badge, then back at the towering monstrosity. "Ma'am, are you the president of this HOA?" "I am," she said proudly. "And you're on our private property." Dave didn't even look up as he scribbled on his clipboard. "And you've got an unpermitted 10-foot illegal structure on your private property." "This is a landscaping screen," she sputtered. "It doesn't need a permit." Dave finally looked at her, tired expression plain on his face. Karen's expression was the same one you'd see on a cop who had heard every excuse in the book. "Ma'am, anything taller than 7 feet needs a county permit. Period. That thing is 10 feet, and it looks like one good gust of wind could—" "Send it crashing straight into this man's yard," Dave said, pointing directly at my house. "It's a safety hazard. You're violating county codes 14A and 22C. You'll get a citation in the mail. 14 days to tear it down or bring it up to code, which is impossible since a 10-foot fence isn't legal on residential property lines. After that, it's $500 a day in fines." He paused, then added dryly, "And frankly, ma'am, this thing fails code, gravity, and taste." He ripped the top sheet off his clipboard and handed it to her. A bold, red stop work order was stamped across the page. Her face drained of color as she realized she'd lost. She had tried to bury me in her HOA rules, and instead, I'd hit her with the county's hammer. There was no sweet-talking her way out of this. She clutched. That paper like it was burning her hands. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The county's authority spoke louder than anything I could have said. But I knew Karen wasn't finished. She wasn't the kind to retreat quietly. When someone like her feels cornered, that's when they're the most dangerous. The half-built monstrosity loomed in her yard like a reminder of her failure. Every time she looked at it, I knew she was thinking of me. And sure enough, about a week later, the real storm began. Only this time, the attacks came in envelopes. The first fine arrived tucked neatly inside an official-looking HOA envelope. $50 for improper lawn maintenance. I couldn't help but laugh. My lawn was flawless. I paid a professional crew to keep it pristine. Then I noticed the evidence photo she had included. It showed a scruffy patch of brown grass, some weeds, and the blurry edge of a house. At first glance, it seemed convincing, but the angle was wrong, the lighting was off. And then it hit me. It wasn't even my yard. She had doctored a photo to make it look like my property. A bad Photoshop job, but dangerous if I couldn't disprove it. So I did what any organized man would do. I walked out front with my phone, stood exactly where she'd taken her photo, and snapped my own picture. I held that day's newspaper in the frame so the timestamp was undeniable. My yard looked immaculate. I printed both images, the fake and the real, and filed them away in a folder marked Exhibit AA. Few days later, another envelope arrived. This one was for $100. Unapproved exterior modifications, it read. The modification? My Cinder block wall. The same wall I had legally applied for and recorded every step of. This was the lie I had been expecting. I pulled out my growing file, my time-stamped application, the video of me dropping it into the HOA's box, the time-lapse footage of construction starting exactly on day 15, just as the bylaws allowed. All of it airtight. Into the folder it went. Exhibit B. Karen was waging a paper war, hoping to drown me in fines until I either paid up or gave in. But I wasn't the average homeowner. I had patience, records, and the stubbornness of a man who builds walls for a living. I showed the stack to Tom, the retired accountant. He skimmed through the notices and sighed. Classic Karen move, he muttered. She'll keep piling these on, then send a letter from her pet lawyer, then slap a lien on your house. Most people panic when they see that word and cut a check. I frowned. But it's not a real lien, is it? Tom smirked. Oh, it'll be real enough on paper. But the so-called debts behind it? Fake as monopoly money. The problem is, she counts on people not knowing the difference and not wanting to spend the money on a lawyer to fight it. Sure enough, the big one came a week later in a certified letter. A notice of lien against my home for $1,500 in so-called unpaid fines and fees. No hearing, no board vote, no appeal process. She had just invented a list of violations, trash cans out of place, an oil stain that didn't exist, all nonsense, and added it all up. It was pure fiction, but fiction or not, it felt threatening. My house, the most valuable thing I owned, was suddenly at risk thanks to her games. Buddy was furious when I showed him. That's it, Mike. This is harassment. We've got to hit back. I nodded. I am hitting back, my way, by the rules. But inside I knew this had crossed a line. Someone willing to forge documents was someone who might do worse, so I decided it was time to protect myself. I ordered a set of discrete, motion-activated security cameras online and spent my Saturday installing them. One under the eaves, aimed at the street. Another giving a wide view of my wall. A third on the back porch. They weren't big, intimidating domes. They were hidden, quiet, designed to catch someone who thought they were unseen. As I was finishing, ladder propped against the house, I heard Mark from next door call out, "Hey, Michael, cameras?" "Just being cautious," I replied. He glanced at the looming wooden monstrosity in Karen's yard and then back at me. "Don't blame you," he said softly. "If you ever need anything, we see a lot from our kitchen window." That small gesture meant more than I expected. For the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. With the cameras up and recording, I felt ready. The paper war was almost over, and I had a bad feeling something bigger was coming. The tension was building. Karen's fake fines were unraveling under scrutiny. The county was bleeding her dry with daily penalties, and her grip on control was slipping fast. And people like Karen? They don't let go quietly. Every time I stepped outside, I felt her eyes on me. The curtains in her house would twitch. When I mowed my lawn, she'd stand on her porch and glare. It wasn't just a feud anymore. It was a battle of endurance, and the question echoing in my mind was one I couldn't ignore. Under this kind of pressure, how long can a good man stay good? The stares grew sharper, and the whispers from her friends got louder whenever I walked by. In the story she spread around, I had become the villain, the stubborn homeowner refusing to obey the rules. The irony of it all was almost laughable. Meanwhile, Mark and Sarah, the neighbors who usually tried to stay neutral, began talking to me more often. They had seen the county inspector visit, the piles of official envelopes in my mailbox, and the certified letters I kept sending back. One afternoon, as I collected my mail, Sarah said softly, "We just want you to know we think what she's doing is wrong. We just don't want any trouble." I nodded. They had young kids, and I knew they were afraid of being Karen's next target. Still, their quiet support reassured me I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. One sleepless night, I sat in my dark living room, torn. I thought about selling the house, moving somewhere quiet without an HOA. That would be the easy path. Just let her win and leave her to rule over her little kingdom of petty rules. But then I thought about the next family that would move in. She'd do the same thing to them and the family after that. Bullies only stop when someone stands up to them. If I left, she'd own this street forever. That's when I knew I couldn't walk away. It wasn't just about my wall or my hedges anymore. It was about principle. You can't invent rules just to hurt people you dislike. Even if the system is flawed, facts still matter. I stood and looked out the window. The street was silent, my cameras quietly recording under the eaves. Strangely, I felt calm. I had chosen my path. I would rely on my documentation, on the truth. Deep down, I knew Karen's next move was coming. Paperwork and intimidation had failed. The only thing left was escalation, something physical. My cameras weren't just for fines anymore. They were my insurance for what was ahead. That night, the side gate clicked, and a sprinkler hissed out. I didn't grab a weapon. Instead, I palmed the remote for the floodlights and slid my prepared 911 script to the top of my desk. Lights first, lawyers second. The night it happened was colder than usual, damp and heavy. I was in my office reviewing blueprints when my phone buzzed, motion detected on camera too. That camera faced my wall. I pulled up the feed. Even in the dim light, the image was clear enough. Two masked figures in hoodies creeping into my yard. One of them carried a sledgehammer. My heartbeat slowed into a steady rhythm. This was it. The escalation I had expected. For a second, anger burned hot. I wanted to rush out and stop them, but I reminded myself, don't swing first. I dialed 911, spoke calmly to the operator, and then flipped the remote. My yard exploded with light. The intruders froze like animals, caught in headlights. Into the phone, I said evenly, "My name is Michael Cole. My address is 123 Sunny Lane. 2 individuals are on my property attempting to destroy my wall with a sledgehammer. They're in masks. I'm inside, not confronting them. My cameras are recording everything." One of them panicked, tugging at the other to run. The one with the sledgehammer roared in frustration and swung. The blow landed with a dull thud. The wall barely flinched. I narrated calmly to the operator as the man swung again. Lights came on in neighbors' houses. I spotted Mark and Sarah's. Window lit by the glow of a phone camera. They were recording too. Then came the sirens, growing louder by the second. The sledgehammer clanged to the ground. They tried to flee but stumbled. 2 police cruisers turned the corner, headlights trapping them. Officers shouted commands, and the vandals surrendered immediately, hands raised. The entire ordeal lasted no more than 3 minutes. I stayed, inside, phone in hand, while the system did its job. When it was over, an officer came to take my statement. One of the suspects was young, barely 20. The other was older, someone I recognized from the HOA board, always sitting at Karen's side. And the kid? He had Karen's sharp eyes, her nephew. My plan had worked. I gave the police everything. My folder of documents, the months of harassment, the fake fines, the doctored photos, the bogus lien, the spite fence. Then I handed over a USB drive with the footage, clear as day. Mark and Sarah added their own video. Detective Miller, who arrived later, confirmed the suspect's phones showed texts from Karen herself asking if the problem was handled. That was the smoking gun. By morning, the neighborhood knew. Videos spread like wildfire online. People who'd stayed silent began sharing their own stories of Karen's bullying. The HOA was now under investigation for misuse of funds. Tom, the retired accountant, came over, triumphant. He had proof Karen had been funneling money to her brother-in-law through fake landscaping invoices and using HOA funds to pay for her personal vendettas through lawyers. Soon after, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The clubhouse was packed, neighbors shoulder to shoulder buzzing with tension. Karen tried to maintain control, but the crowd wasn't having it. I stood up, calm and steady, and connected my laptop to the projector. I laid out everything: the vandalized hedges, my submitted application, the fake fines, the doctored lawn, photo, the fraudulent lien. Tom handed out proof of financial misconduct. Then I played the video of the attack. Gasps filled the room as everyone saw her nephew and board ally caught in the act. Karen shrieked denial, but I delivered the final blow. The police had the texts. Detective Miller himself could confirm. That broke the room wide open. A motion was made to remove Karen, and nearly every hand shot up. In minutes, she was stripped of power, her ally gone too, and an independent audit ordered. Karen stormed out to a chorus of phone cameras. The weeks after felt different, peaceful, earned. Tom became interim president, and his audit confirmed the corruption. Karen's nephew and board ally took plea deals. The HOA refunded families for her petty fines, and even the spite fence was ordered torn down. My bogus lien vanished with a formal apology, which I pinned proudly in my garage. Life returned to normal but better. Neighbors waved, kids played, and people talked freely again. I planted vines along my wall, approved without hassle under the new fair board. Now, when I sit outside after long days, I see green climbing higher every season. My wall isn't a award trophy anymore. It's part of a garden. And though everything is calmer, I know one thing hasn't changed. The wall still makes Karen furious.